Welcome to day 27 of buying my reseller warehouse. I have got some zingers for you today, including an email that I got from my old landlord that left me cackling. I mean, I could not control myself. I was cackling so hard, and I will share the details of that going back to one of those earlier days when I walked you around the old place. But I am back. I am back after a short break. I know that there was a few days there over the weekend that you guys didn't see any new videos come out, and that was because I traveled to Indianapolis. I was going to a Boy Scout Trade-O-Ree, that's our scouting memorabilia shows, and I've just gotten back. Right here I've got the van I need to unpack. You can see that it was pretty full. In fact, believe it or not, it's not as full as it was. I actually stopped at my cousin's house in Virginia and offloaded some of the stuff to her. She's does consignment for me, and so I was able to drop off some of the boxes and kind of reduce this pile of stuff that's in the van. But things were so bad that I had to strap my hand truck on the roof rack of the van so that I could make it all work. And so yeah, there's a lot of stories to tell today, and let me get this van unloaded and maybe I'll get into some of those. All right, so normally I'm not filming from this side of the building with the noisy highway right there, but on day 27 I do have another really important update. And if I just spin around here, you guys can see it. We have our sign. Oh man, Trevor from All-Star Signs and Indian Trail, thank you for taking care of me. He's still gonna come out. We're gonna get some little parking signs on these yellow barriers here, but this one right here is the one I've been waiting on. I know it's real shiny with the sunshine, you can't see it, but the first time that I drive by on this 74 and that night light is shining on my sign, it's going to be like, oh man, what a moment. Not that, you know, I mean, there's thousands of cars that travel on this road every day, so there is a little bit of visibility there that, who knows, might bring home some opportunities for me. I do have on there a website, SanteeSwapper.com. That's simply just a link tree, which I don't know if link trees are old or it's still a good idea or whatever, but on there I have some of my basic information, you know, link to my contact information about buying and selling scouting memorabilia, my eBay stores, whatnot, that kind of stuff is on there. So I probably need to go and check it in a few minutes and just update that and make sure that it's accurate now that hopefully a few more people are going to check that out. So let's go inside. I'll share another update that we're pretty excited about. So I've talked about how we've had a problem with shipping and how we haven't been able to set up our US mail delivery. And so unfortunately, the other night I did my Whatnot show, and in the Whatnot show, I was doing it on a Wednesday night. That's when we do it. We even call it Whatnot Wednesday. I was doing the Whatnot show and I was leaving the next morning to go to this Trade-O-Ree in Indianapolis. And so I had to go late at night to go to the post office and drop off the mail and get it scanned in. And so I did that. I think that might have been the end of day 26, in fact, if you guys remember that, if you watched that video. So funny story there, I go to the Indian Trail, North Carolina post office, which is only about maybe a mile and a half that way down 74, and go in there literally at midnight, but you know, the lobby is unlocked and open and the lights are on. And I go in there, and kid you not, there's like no cars in the parking lot, right? Literally, there's a guy sleeping in the corner, which kind of broke my heart. You know, it was very cold last week, and so here's this guy sleeping in the lobby where it's warm, no blanket, no pillow, just kind of curled up on the floor. And I felt bad because I was disturbing him, but at the same time, it's like, sorry, I have to go scan these things in at the little, you know, they have the little digital station there where you can do your scans. And so I spoke to him very briefly and just said, oh, hey, you know, how you doing? And I started doing my scan thing. And, you know, those things are really tediously slow. So it took me about maybe 10 or 15 minutes. It took an eternity because I was nervous, you know, having this person there with the struggle. But the guy didn't get up, he didn't talk to me, he didn't ask me anything at all. He just kind of stayed curled up in a ball there on the floor in the corner. And so when I left, which I don't do this either ever, because I'm not that virtuous, but I did give him some $20 bill just because I felt like, you know, he obviously was struggling. If you had to go into a post office at night just to stay warm, you know, I did honestly feel bad for him, and so I gave him some cash, and so that so luckily that will never have to happen again, because today we met Robbie, our postal carrier. So excited on a Monday. He shows up, young guy. He walks in, and all of my employees were here, kind of introduced him to everybody. It was almost like a celebrity had shown up. And so we explained how, what we do. We have all these packages that need to be scanned, and he was happy to do all that. And he was sort of determined that he could get this pickup in their system. And literally he was like, well, do you have a laptop I could sit down at and put this in? And I was like, absolutely, here you go, right here. And so he sat there, bless his heart, as we say in the South, for about 15 minutes, trying every address he could find, every variation of my address. And each time he put it in, it would not accept it. It kicked out either not available at this address, or it wouldn't even go through. He tried it on his phone. He tried everything. And this is exactly what I had done. And I said to him, afterwards I said, I appreciate you trying. I said, that's exactly why I have gone to the post office twice and called a third time, speaking to supervisors each time, because I couldn't get it to work. And I said, so now you can see what I was up against. But I think we are locked in with him to have a daily pickup Monday through Friday. And he came, I don't know if this will be consistent or not, probably not so on a Monday. Monday's usually their late day. He came a little closer to 1 o'clock, which would be perfect for us. But what I usually see is that Mondays is the day that they pick up a little later because they're catching up over the weekend. And then normally the other days of the week, it gets a little earlier. So we'll see if that matches up with our schedule too well. I might still have to take a few things to the post office, or we'll just kind of see how that plays out. So, but anyways, I'll have a few more stories to tell a little bit later in day 27, but I just wanted to give you this little catch up in the middle of the day. Wrapping up day 27, the employees have left, and I'm getting everything tidied up so that I can go. Got a couple of stories to share, including the one I led off the day talking about an email that I can't wait to share with you guys. But first, let me kind of catch you up on my trip over the weekend to Indianapolis. So I did leave here Thursday morning as planned and drove to Louisville, Kentucky to meet a gentleman who I was buying the collection that belonged to his mother and father. They'd passed away a few years back, and he had all the scout stuff that had been in the garage. He had ideas of doing something with it, but eventually his wife convinced him he needed to sell it and get it out of her garage. This happens a lot, actually. And so we made a deal, and I met him and his son at a coffee shop just north of Louisville off the interstate. And it was really interesting for me. It was a very friendly situation. He was happy for me to drive all that way. He only had to drive about an hour and a half, and it took me like 8 hours to get to Louisville. So it was a pretty good deal for him. But when I do those kind of deals, I oftentimes will take everything. And so, man, this was everything. Like, there was all kinds of boxes. So I kind of purposely drove up there with my van mostly empty, knowing that I was going to be buying a lot of collections. And so that worked out. And so I went inside to get a coffee, and I think a Danish. This is like 8 o'clock at night, and I still had a couple more hours of driving to go. And they loaded it up. So that went well. Ironically, that was not the first collection that was picked up for me that night. So let me rewind the clock. I had been talking to a gentleman who is in his 60s, but is in poor health. And we've been talking back and forth about a collection. He lives in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And he was a scouter, all kinds of stuff. And he had a fairly small collection, but there was some good stuff in there I was really interested in. So we worked out a deal where I was going to get him to mail it to me. But there were some complications because he doesn't have a car. He had to rely on his mom and everything. So anyways, we went back and forth, and I mailed him a check. Now, I rarely do this. This is not really how I usually operate my business. But sometimes when I'm talking to a scouter, we exchange all the stories and everything, kind of have a little bit of a connection there. And so I mailed him the check, and we were texting mostly back and forth, although we had several phone conversations. And so I could see that he had received the check and that it had been cashed. You go in your online banking and see that. And so I messaged him, about when would he send me a shipping receipt, because I sent him basically half the money, and I would send him the rest of it once I had the items in hand. And so I sent it to him, and I think I got a reply back that he was gonna get his mom to drive him to the post office to mail it, and then poof, I didn't hear from him again for like a whole week. And I finally, I wasn't texting him every day, but eventually I was like, hey, I haven't heard from you. Silence, silence, silence. Hey, what's going on? Yeah. And so it's one of these things where like, you're kind of left like not knowing, and your mind kind of goes to bad places. And so my friend who I was going to the Trade-O-Ree with me in Indiana, he was coming from Georgia, and we talked on the phone because we were going to split a hotel room. And he told me that he was going to drive from Georgia, and he was going to spend the night in Tennessee, in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And so I said, Matt, I need you to do me a favor. So bless his heart, Matthew, thank you so much for doing this. He agreed to let me draw him into this deal. And I messaged this guy and I said, my friend Matt is going to be in Chattanooga tomorrow night. He's going to come to your house. I mean, I had mailed a check, so I knew the guy's address. He's going to come to your address and pick up the collection, and he'll pay you in cash for the balance. And this guy had been, he had some bills to pay and stuff, so he was a little anxious about money. So I thought maybe that would kind of motivate things. Well, sure enough, the joker calls me like an hour later, and I'm like, well, look who's there. And I take the call. And of course, I feel terrible because he's been in the hospital the whole week. This is, and he told me that he has congestive heart failure. And so if you know what that is, you have a lot of fluid that builds up. And he said that he was in the hospital and they had to drain a lot of fluid off. And so anyways, I was felt bad about kind of poking him on the text messages. But I said to him, I was like, okay, well, my buddy's going to come by and pick up the collection. He's going to give you cash, and we're going to be good, right? And so he's like, yeah, that's fine. So when I got to Indianapolis Thursday night, I checked in met up with Matt at the hotel, and I got Matt to tell me the story. And basically, he drove up to this guy's. It was not a house; it's like an apartment that he rents in sort of a really old building. And he said the guy was standing out front in his pajamas and had a little grocery sack. And I had told Matt that I thought it was a box. And Matt was like, oh, well, I hope it fits in my car. I got a lot of stuff in my car. And literally the guy had like a Walmart grocery bag of stuff. And so, but the guy was very talkative, and Matt talked to him. They're standing out there in the cold talking. And the guy sort of handed him the grocery bag. Matt gave him the cash. And, made as we jokingly say this, we had a little drug deal in the parking lot, but really we're just, selling Boy Scout patches. And so when I got to the hotel room, Matt had the little Walmart grocery bag sitting on the bed. And he was like, I didn't open it. I don't know what's in there. And I said, okay, well, let me just peek. So I sort of peeked in there and saw the few things that I knew had some value. And I was like, okay, we're good. So that was collection number 2. Collection number 3, I had to talk to a guy who lives in Indiana. And I told him, he called me the week, really on Monday, I think it was. And I said, you're not going to believe this, but I'm going to be in Indiana at the end of this week. And I said, if you want to come show me the stuff, I would be happy to make you an offer. So this was kind of blind. I really didn't know what the guy had. But he came and met me Saturday at the event when it was kind of winding down. He brought his daughter, who was older. She's probably in her 20s. She lives in Indianapolis. And so I think he, was tag teaming this with a chance to see her. And this was stuff from his father, who'd been active in scouting for many years and been on staff at lots of national events. And so, we kind of went through everything, flipped through it, and again, in the parking lot, these parking lot deals, right? And I made him an offer, and then he had to call his brother because, these estate things aren't always that easy. He had to call his brother, and then he came back with sort of a meet in the middle kind of price. And so we settled on that. And so literally just sort of transferred the stuff to my van from the parking lot. Now at this point, my van starts to get a little bit full. So I have a buddy of mine who is at the Indianapolis Trade-O-Ree who does some consignment for me. And I give him stuff to sell for me on consignment. We've been doing this for several years, and it's been a great relationship. So I talked to him and I said, hey, I just bought this stuff. Some of it is Indiana stuff. How about you pull your car around and I'm going to put some of this in your car, and you can sell that for me on consignment. So even though it's Scout stuff, this has worked out because, as I mentioned in a previous video, I can't remember which day it was, in the old building, we were kind of running out of room, and so I had tried to develop some consignment relationships so that I could get some stuff out of that warehouse building because we couldn't process it all and store it all there. So this guy was one of the consignment relationships I built, and it's been very, very happy. I'm happy, he's happy, so we're keeping that going. So Trade-O-Ree is kind of winding down, and I knew I needed to kind of leave a little bit early being about 2 o'clock, because I had another stop to make. So I had come to the Trade-O-Ree, going west across Tennessee, above Knoxville, up to Louisville, and then up to Indiana. So what I would sort of call that, western loop right there. And so coming home, I was gonna shoot straight across to Ohio, head towards Columbus, Ohio. And north of Columbus, Ohio, I was meeting my 4th person who I was buying scouting memorabilia from, another collection. This guy, both of his sons are Eagle Scouts, but both of his sons, one lives on the West Coast and one lives there in the area. We're not interested in, Dad's old scouting memorabilia. And he had several banker boxes full of stuff. It wasn't anything like super, super rare, valuable, but it was just a lot of stuff. And so we had agreed to a price, again, based on pictures he sent me. And he was super nice. It was really, really a good visit. And so, but it was cold as all get out. Oh my gosh, I got to his house, it's dark. It's literally like, I think 18 degrees outside. There's like snow that's all been, luckily the roads were really clear, but there's, snow that's been plowed and it's all piled up everywhere. So I start loading my van and I'm like, oh man, I said, I told him, I said, I need to do some Tetris. And so I had to like rearrange all these boxes on my van. So even though I had given my consignment friend some stuff, I still had a lot of stuff left. And so I was Tetrising like crazy. And it got to the point where I got all of his stuff in there, but there was no room for my hand truck. So I said to the guy, I said, do you have some rope? I'm gonna have to tie my hand truck to the roof of my minivan in order to get it back home. So he, of course, had rope in the garage, as all people do, and he loaned it to me. And so I was, getting up on the roof of the car, stepping up over there and tying this down. And he even gave me a spare towel that I could put underneath the handle of the hand truck so it didn't scratch on the top of the roof of my car. And so, about, I don't know, maybe it was like 7 something at night, I'm about ready to pull out of his driveway, and my van is just absolutely filled with boxes. And I'm like, oh man. So out of the blue, I call my cousin who lives in Virginia, who also has been doing consignment for me for several years. And I said, her name's Christy. I said, Christy, I said, I know that, this is a little unexpected, but I'd like to come by your house tomorrow morning and drop off some stuff. And so she lived about 3.5 hours away. I'm up in Columbus, Ohio, and I've got to drive through West Virginia on the West Virginia Turnpike through Charleston, and then get down to where she lives. And so she was fine with that, kind of, spur of the moment. So I drive, and my GPS is like, you're going to get there like 11:30, 11:40 at night. So Saturday night, 11:40 at night, I pull into the hotel that I had booked online, and still have strapped on top of the roof that hand truck. And so the next morning I made sure to wake up early because they go to church, and I wanted to get there by 8 to her house so that it wouldn't interrupt their morning. And so I got there. Her yard is covered in 4 inches of snow and ice. Now I could pull up to her yard, no problem, but to get this stuff in her storage shed, we had to walk across the ice. So literally I'm unpacking the van in her frozen backyard and unloading the items into the storage building. So anyways, that worked out. I was able to reduce the size that I had by about half. And then this morning when you saw me open the van up earlier, that's what was left, even after having taken all that stuff out and given it to these 2 consignment people. So just crazy. This is kind of, life of reseller. And not only that, I even bought stuff at the Trade-O-Ree beyond that. This bag of patches, it's full of patches. I bought this. I individually hand-picked every patch in here. I went through tubs and tubs and tubs and picked out every patch that's in here. and it weighs 8 pounds. I pulled 8 pounds of patches, and then asked the guy, what would you sell this bag for? I didn't know it was 8 pounds. I waited here once we got home, but he made me a deal on it, and so I got that. So I really am, despite having this building and all this stuff I've talked about, my jokingly my U-Haul death pile, still buying stuff, because we have to keep it going, right? This is what the reseller life is like. You're gonna have to get inventory when the getting is good, and it's like I said, I rarely travel these long distances, and so I had kind of booked up these appointments to meet people and buy things along the way. So that was really, really good. Happy about that. Let me now come back and tell you the story about the email. So this will kind of wrap up day 27. Although first, let me tell you, I did talk to my neighbor who, her name is Chrissy. She has the refinishing business. Today I took her over that big giant desk, the desk that I had been using in my business for about 10 years. And she's going to refinish that one for me as well, because I was so happy about the other work she did for me. And so when I talked to her about that, I said, hey, I need to figure out what the deal is with dumpsters. She has a little mini dumpster, like a half-size dumpster. The people next to me over here have a full-size dumpster. And I was kind of like, we just have like office trash and stuff. We don't really get like big things to throw away. But I know my wife doesn't want me to bring home in the van, bags of office trash. And so I probably need to look into that. And she was trying to remember what she paid for hers. And so I just said, what would you think about if I offered to chip in towards your dumpster and let me just put my office trash in your dumpster? And she thought about it for a second. She was like, yeah, that'd be fine. So she talked to me later and gave me a price. She figured out she had to go back and find what was she actually paying per month. Gets picked up every Tuesday. And so she basically said, I think like 40%. So like, she's 60%, I'm 40%. But that's a lot cheaper. 40% is a lot cheaper than paying 100% of having my own dumpster. So I was real happy about that. So I would have Venmoed her some money, and I told her I would do that every month. And so that's great, having a next door neighbor that you kind of have a little bit of a positive relationship with. I've already talked about that, so that's kind of fun. All right, now this email. This email came in a couple of days ago, but it actually came in on a Tuesday of this past week, and I just knew that I had to come on and include this in my 30-day series, Buying My Reseller Warehouse. Because if you go back and watch day 15, and day 15 starts with me walking around the parking lot at my old location, and I think the title is like Not Gonna Miss It. I think that's the title of day 15. And in there, I just show you guys what I have been putting up with. Wrecked cars everywhere, right? And I mean, I'm not talking about like 10, 20, 30. I'm talking about dozens and dozens of wrecked cars, stacked 3 deep, right? There's just so many cars everywhere. It just got old, right? You can go back and watch day 15 if you want to see that. So literally what happened was on Monday, the realtor came, the listing agent who's going to list my old unit for sale or for lease, and the unit next to me that has been available for months now. I gave him my keys, and the very next day, what is the timing? The very next day, I get an email, the first email I have ever gotten from the landlord, where like all of the tenants of this location are copied. This has never happened, and I've been there for, as I mentioned, almost 6 years. And so I won't read you the whole thing, and I'm probably not supposed to anyways, just, for sharing someone's business, but I will just read a few things. This is formal notice regarding unauthorized parking and storage of vehicles and personal property in the commons area. I'm like, hell, where's this been? Hell, I've been there for 6 years, and I've never seen a landlord actually step up and say, this is crazy, all this cars parked everywhere. Finally, after I moved, the day after I handed my keys, this email comes out telling all of these other tenants that they've got to clean up their shit. And then he includes a picture, which if I'm really cocky, I'm going to include in this video. I'll pop it up for you and see. That it's, to be clear, the tenants are not permitted to park, store, or leave vehicles or personal property in any of the highlighted areas. You mean so when people had 3 cars deep parked Stacked? They weren't supposed to do that? Really? You mean when the guy had like this whole parking lot on my side where he was basically using it as a car lot and had like 5 cars all parked there with like for sale signs pointing out, and they were taking up, you're not supposed to park there? And in the grass where all those, you're not supposed to park, what? To me, I told my wife later when I read this, but let me just finish this part. It says, all vehicles and personal property must be removed from the common areas no later than the end of the month, no exceptions. Any remaining items after the deadline may be removed at the tenant's expense and treated as a lease violation. Let me tell you what this is. This is the first shot fired in a war. And this war is this landlords trying to get these car people out of there. Because what I know is happening right now, well, maybe I'm just speculating, but what I think is happening is that they now have my unit, which they used to get a lot of money for, and the unit next to me, which they haven't gotten any rent since August. So they have basically is it 1/4 or a third? I don't know how, I can't remember how many units are there. I think there's 6 units, so that'd be, about a third unrented, and I would say unrentable. Like nobody is going to come there and want to rent those spaces when there's no parking. And all of the parking is all these wrecked cars everywhere, as you saw on day 15. And so I think what's going on here is this is the landlord firing the first shot across the bow in a war. He's going to go to war with these other tenants about their businesses and about them having all of these cars, because where are they going to put all these cars, right? Well, it's not like, get a broom out and sweep and clean up. It's like, you have 20 cars that don't run. Where are you going to put them? It's not like you could go to Extra Space Storage and say, hey, I need to rent a storage building so I could put 20 cars there. I mean, that's silly, but you get my point, right? It's like, it's almost comical to think that there is a solution for these guys other than they have to then go to war with the landlord. I don't know what's going to happen, but I don't care. I'm not there anymore. So anyways, as I said earlier, when I read this email, I cackled out loud. It was just, I don't know. It's just like, it was like a mixture of emotions. I was like, finally, he gets it. That's what I've been dealing with all these years. And you know what? And the nice thing about it was, again, I have turned in my keys. It is not my problem. It's not my drama. I'm not ever going to hear what the resolution was. I don't really care what the resolution was. I don't have to deal with it. So that, my friends, is the end of day 27. I appreciate you watching this video. There's a playlist that you can go and see. We are getting close to the end. And there's a rumor going around that tomorrow that the tables might arrive. We'll see if it really happens. I'm really anxious to see. But that is the word on the street. So if it does, day 28, you will get to see that. It's not tomorrow, it'll be day 29 or day 30. But we will make sure that before this ends, I will make sure you get to see those beautiful workstations come in, which will be our new permanent setup here. So thanks very much for watching. Appreciate it. Jason Spangler, the SanteeSwapper.